Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening and welcome to this evening's Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022. We've got a special date tonight, 2/22/22. For those, we do have a couple of items to go over before we officially get started. This meeting is live on Comcast television, local channel 27, and on the Pacific Coast TV's website. We have a few, I should say, community members in the audience, and they are and will be allowed to participate in tonight's meeting. For the review of the attendees, the Planning Commissioner Chair will open and allow for general public comment prior to specific items on the agenda, as well as opening up public comment during the specific items listed on the agenda. During that time, those who want to speak will be recognized by raising your virtual raising icon, a hand icon. I will assist with the public comment and allow each person to speak. If you're dialing by telephone only, you can push star 6 to mute and unmute and star 9 to raise and unraise your hand. Otherwise, if you're on a computer, tablet, iPhone, etc., there are icons and features that you can press. 3 minutes will be given to each of the commenters and a timer will show up on the screen. As of right now, I know of no public comment that was submitted after the agenda packet was posted. Staff can also clarify that during their presentation. I thank you for your patience during our remote meetings and will now hand it over to Chair Gorn to officially begin this evening's meeting.
Hey, everyone. So happy to open the 2/22/22 meeting of the HMBPC Planning Commission. If you could stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Bridget, you want to call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Reddick?
I'm here.
Mr. Benjamin?
I am here.
Vice Chair Hernandez?
I am present.
And Chair Gorn?
I'm here.
All 4 commissioners are present.
Great. So, our first order of business is approval of minutes for February 8th, 2022, but that was an unusual one. We're going to hear from Winter about that one.
Yes, and I see Commissioner Benjamin has his hand up, but I just wanted to interject that at that meeting we had 2 commissioners recused, and we had an additional commissioner, Commissioner Polgar, who's no longer with us. And so for approval of these minutes, the 2 commissioners, Commissioner Ruddock and Vice Chair Hernandez, who were not participating in the discussion of the Polgar Street Improvement Project, will not vote on the minutes since they weren't part of the meeting at that point. That leaves us with just 2 commissioners, but since the minutes can be approved without a resolution or ordinance, that's fine. The remaining 2 commissioners can review the minutes, provide comments, and then move whether to approve them.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you. That was a brilliant anticipation of my question.
There you go.
And I also just wanted to follow up. I noted that Bridget had mentioned there was a red line version. I must have missed it in my rush through, but Bridget, I wonder if you could just point out the red line change in the minutes.
It was I sent it this evening actually at 5:10, so you might have missed it. It's on page 4 and well, I think in the PDF it actually is just on page 4. It might not have come over. It's on page 4 and 5. The second bullet, the sentence was a little jarbled, and so we actually Commissioner Gorn pointed it out to myself, and so we've edited it, and it's clarifying just that trees in the traffic circles could be good, but may be a visual impediment. Trees also could absorb water, which could be a plus. This is also true of any other plantings in the circles. So just kind of clarified that bullet.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I move to approve those minutes.
Okay, second.
We have a second?
I think you will be the second chair.
You have to be the second.
Well, I guess I have to be, huh? Okay.
What a weird situation.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so roll call will be Commissioner Benjamin.
Yes.
And Chair Gorn.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Motion
you.
approved.
So we always open every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on any item that's not in the agenda tonight. Bridget, do we have anybody who, now would be the time, raise your hand. Bridget, do you have anybody who has something else to say?
No, I have none. I believe most that are on here are the projects. Yeah.
All right, so I'm not going to open that public hearing yet, and we'll move on to our first item, which is parklets. We're going to talk about parklets in the Sidewalk Cafe program. It's a study session, so we're just going to provide direction and input.
That's right, and I'll just briefly, good evening, Chair Gorn, Commission, community members present. Nice to see everyone. Staff is going to present a concept for a program tonight that we intend to bring to you for a coastal development permit review at a future time. And so this is a matter that you've considered on individual basis in the past. This commission has approved 2 parklets, one very recently for the Barterra Vittoria shared installation down over by the Main Street Bridge. But a couple of years ago, you've also approved a parklet that did not get installed at Cafe Society. With that, I'm going to leave it to staff to present what they can. They've prepared quite a few things for your consideration tonight, and know that Scott Phillips and I can sit in the back and we'll answer planning questions, but Joe Butcher, our community preservation specialist, is going to lead this off, and Jonathan Wu, our assistant engineer, is also going to be giving you some information. So I'm going to, Joe, give me a minute here to make sure I'm clicking. So I don't usually have this risky thing to do here. Hang on. Let me know if you have a presentation.
Yes, it looks good.
Good.
All right. Excellent. Joe, you're good to go.
All right, thank you. Hello, everybody. Hello, commissioners. We're really excited to get your feedback on this study session for the Parklet and Sidewalk Cafe program. We've got a lot of feedback from a lot of local businesses, and I'm excited to share that. So as you can see, we want to talk about the background, how this came about, and how we're moving forward with this. Kind of go over what this program would entail, get some feedback, get some community input, see if it's where it is on their radar, and if they're supportive, and then of course have you guys discuss suggestions or anything you think that we may have missed or anything at all. But next slide, please. Thanks, Joel. So real quick, the background of this originally started, as you know, through COVID. COVID obviously in 2020 created a lot of issues for a lot of people and a lot of businesses. And we quickly tried to adapt to be able to accommodate to their needs. So once COVID shut down for indoor seating and indoor dining and only takeout only, and then eventually allowed for outdoor dining, and a lot of our establishments didn't have that capability, we did a temporary permit to allow for sidewalk cafes and potentially parklets, to where I really went door to door to all of our heritage downtown businesses, spoke about their needs, how we can facilitate to be able to help what they need out of this. We even received some grant funding to allow for, we got some water barricades, as you've seen, down at Vittoria and Barterra for a while. We lent those out so they can use those to get this little program, moving, at least any help that we could offer. And we did also get some grant funding to potentially even help people with building or the planning side of a more permanent parklet, which is why, now we've kind of rolled into this program. So with that, this downtown parklet and sidewalk program is really coordinated towards outdoor dining space within the heritage downtown. Parklets, as you know, they use portions of the streets, often parking spaces, sometimes sidewalks. They allow for landscaping, outside dining, seating, sometimes even bicycle parking, whatnot. Whereas sidewalk cafes are just tables and dining areas alongside the frontage of the establishment, but it's still allowing for ADA and plenty of pedestrian passage. Next slide, please. So our intentions with this is really to complement the downtown aesthetics of our heritage downtown, to improve safety and the comfort for our pedestrians, to aid in traffic calming. So as I mentioned before, the funds that we did receive for, to help out with these parklets actually was a part of a traffic calming grant funding. So this is a great way to be able to slow traffic down on the heritage Main Street. This encourages people to park once and walk the downtown for more, lengthy times and downtown visitations. We still have plenty of adequate parking, even if we were to have more parklets pop up, but all while maintaining the city's right-of-ways, maintaining drainage, making sure that we're not neglecting that we're still maintaining our street trees and trimming, as well as ADA access. So the intent of this program is to, like Jill said, to obtain a coastal development permit in the defined area, which we'll show you where we've defined the areas of the heritage downtown, where it would make the most sense, as well as put a cap on the parking space conversion in a distributed manner. Now it's distributed easily anyway for us because we, like other cities, we don't have rows of restaurants on each block. So we've got them kind of scattered. So we kind of have that benefit of having these parklet possibilities being, distributed throughout the downtown. Our design requirements, we would have some that are mandatory, but as well as just guidelines. That way we, if we haven't thought of something, somebody's got a creative, excellent parklet and something that still could fit all of the criteria of the coastal development permit, that they might be able to work within those parameters. And we want it to be flexible. We want it to be, for people to be able to have that sidewalk cafe or the parklet or both. So that's the intent of this program. So this is the Heritage Downtown Limitation Maps. This is where it made the most sense, where we have the most concentrated areas of restaurants. So we've got it from about the 300 block of Main Street all the way down to about mid 750, 730 of Main Street. That's pretty much where our restaurants end. We do have Pa'asamoon a little bit further south, but they've got a much larger area. This is for the areas that you really have a need for, outside dining if that were their interest. But that being said, after we met with the Architectural Advisory Committee, it was kind of brought to our attention that we do have these side streets that would make sense too. There are a few restaurants along the way. So we wanted to include that if they had the possibility or the idea that they would want to do a parklet, that maybe they're not limited to Main Street only, and they could use that side street, which would also still open up more passage on Main Street. And then as you can see from Purissima, that little 500 block is just including where Spice Me Thai is and the little market there. So that's the limitations. We'll go over this a little bit later in the slides. We'll discuss what the numbers are. And that's what I just went over. This is just this is just where we're going, from 300 to about 750 Main. That's the main concentrated area. And that's the area where I've had the most people and most businesses express their interest in potentially having a parklet. Here is just an idea, a sketch of what a good sidewalk cafe. Oh, I got Somehow I lost my screen here. I'm sorry, hang on a second. Apologize. Now I'm having technical difficulties. Here we go. So this is just a little sketch of what a well-designed little cafe, sidewalk cafe and parklet would look like. And also where it really demonstrates excellent through pedestrian passage. So you see that little green area, the circle shows pedestrians there that, you know, has adequate spacing for ADA as well as just getting through the sidewalks. I apologize for the stumbling here. I'm kind of losing my grounds here on my computer. This is just another view. You can see that the sidewalk cafe allows for adequate walking space in between the establishment as well as the cafe, and a little section, if you see that there, that actually would provide for some sort of separation between parking, traffic, or just the street in itself. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Jonathan. He is our associate engineer, and he'll explain what we're looking at right here.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jill, for the warm introduction. Like they said, I'm Jonathan, the assistant engineer. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of street right-of-ways, not only within our city of Half Moon Bay, but also with other cities within the San Mateo County. So you can kind of see on your screen here that the first city that we've kind of looked into was Redwood City, and we kind of spot chose a few locations. And one location was on Main Street between Jefferson Avenue and Main Street. I think I didn't do that correctty. It's Broadway Street between Jefferson Avenue and Main Street. My apologies about that. But you can kind of see that there's a 19-foot sidewalk on your left-hand side, along with an 8-foot parking lane, mainly for parallel parking. So it's a little bit different than our case here on Main Street and most streets within the Heritage downtown. You have a couple of 13-foot driving lanes. And similar to the other side, there's an 8-foot parking lane or a parklet with an additional 14-foot sidewalk on the opposite side. And towards the top of your screen, there's an approximated about 80 feet of functional right-of-way width within this corridor over here. Next slide, please. The next location that we kind of looked into was San Carlos. It was on Laurel Street between Cherry Street and San Carlos Avenue. And for this, it's actually a very similar case towards, Main Street in the city of Half Moon Bay, where you kind of see you have slanted parking, you have angled parking, and it's actually also approximately a 70-foot right-of-way, which is a similar case that we have along Main Street. So you could see a 10-foot sidewalk on each side. It's pretty symmetrical, where you have, like I said, a 10-foot sidewalk on each side, 14-foot parking or parklet area, and a 10-foot driving lane on each side. Next slide, please. Another area is San Mateo. And similar to our case, they have approximately about 70 feet of functional right-of-way. A little bit asymmetrical, but there's an 8-foot wide sidewalk on your left-hand side there with the 16-foot parklet and parking lane, as well as a 10-foot driving lane, and to follow that up with a 10-foot sidewalk on the right side. And again, it's a similar case where you have angled parking similar to Main Street. Next slide, please. Now, the next location that we kind of looked into was at Burlingame, and this is on Burlingame Avenue between Primrose Road and Park Road. So they have a little bit wider sidewalks, kind of like the other cities, a 16-foot and a 15-foot sidewalk on your left and right-hand side, respectively, with a 9-foot parking/parklet area for parking purposes. Again, it's parallel parking, so it's a little bit different with a 10-foot driving lane. Next slide, please. And now coming back to Half Moon Bay, and this is kind of looking similar to the Vittoria and the Bartera parklet that it went to the Planning Commission a couple meetings ago, and as you can see, kind of did these measurements on Google Map, and I forgot to mention that for all these locations, we didn't physically go there and take these measurements. We just took it off of Google Maps, so approximate measurement. But on the left-hand side, you have an approximate 12-foot sidewalk with an angled 13-foot parking lane or parklet, and a couple 11-foot driving lanes, and somewhat symmetrical on the opposite side, besides a 10-foot sidewalk. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll bring it back to Joe.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, so now we're going to kind of go down to what this parklet program would, Parklet and Sidewalk Cafe program review process would look like, and how we would, begin navigating through this. Essentially, we're looking at a pre-application where the applicant would come in City Hall, sit down, and where staff would determine if they're eligible, meaning that they're in good standing, they don't have any outstanding code violations, they have their adequate business licensing and whatnot. And then assuming they fit all that criteria, then we move forward to the actual, I guess, more of a formal application process where under consideration that the Planning Commission approves for the CDP for compliance, what we would look for is a full review from multiple departments, from our city departments to the fire district, to review of architectural advisory committee, that upon that, we then come through with some program standards and guidelines. So that would be like design, drainage. I know one of the biggest concerns we have is with parklets is that we make sure that whomever the applicants are, whoever has the parklet specifically, that they maintain that storm drain clean out, that they're not just letting the parklet just collect. So that's very important. But that also, we go on to the furniture, the lighting, the heating, the windscreens, et cetera. And ultimately, there would be conditions that we would place on the conditions of approval through the CDP. So we would want to make sure that we're also staying consistent with that as well. And then lastly, we want to make sure that while they're applying and they're going through this process, that they do notify their neighbors and be, good neighbors of the downtown. Because I think everybody wants to know when that comes up, and we've seen that before. We also would have a license agreement where the city council would need to approve this, but once we get this license agreement, then it would be more standardized, and it also gives us a little more leverage as well for in the event we have somebody that just doesn't maintain their parklet or doesn't maintain the conditions that we've set out, then we can essentially cancel their parklet. We could cancel their agreement. Building permits are essential. I think building permits give us an opportunity to really make sure that everything is done properly, that everything is to ADA, that we are looking at correct materials, spacing, and it gives us an opportunity to do inspections and really hold them to what, through their design review and through what they've submitted, that they are sticking to that. And then finally, post-installation oversight, which that would be me personally, going through and making sure that each parklet with their conditions of approval are actually being consistent and following through with their obligations. So not to touch too long on this, but basically with the license agreement, so the businesses would need to indemnify the city. It would name the city as an additional insured. And like I said, it gives us leverage for them to provide maintenance so that these parklets just aren't approved, built, and then just falling apart. So that gives us a little teeth. Something that we want to discuss with you guys is parklets in the public use. We've really read the full gamut from some cities that allow for parklets to be used as public space after hours of operation, and some cities that are pretty restrictive on the use of the parklets for only operational hours in that business. So that's where we're open for discussion. But the main thing is for these parklets that we make sure that ADA parking spaces are retained or replaced in the event that one is built over an ADA space, that it is replaced adequately with the proper spacing to allow for pick up and drop off, as well as that they do not block or occupy EV charging spaces. Next slide, please. So you've already seen this map, and we won't stay on here too long. This is the map, again, from the limitations that we decided what makes the most sense for where we have the most outdoor dining or dining areas. So actually we've taken the time and we've done a parking space inventory. So we've determined by block, approximately, actually not approximately, it's actually to the parking space, how many parking spaces that we have. And one of the things that we've discussed in this program would actually be to limit the amount of parking spaces to be utilized by parklets per block, but all of it not to exceed 20%. That way, we're still allowing for adequate parking per block. And as you can see, for the 300 block, for example, Vittoria and Barterra are going to occupy 5 spaces, and maximum for 20% would be 6. So essentially, doesn't leave a whole lot anywhere else on that block. But just going down the row, you get a sense of how many spaces could be utilized, but how many more are left over. So in total, of the area that you saw on that map, we have a total of 254 parking spaces with the maximum potential for only 52 spaces. And right now, as far as the most interested parties, we have approximately about 10 spaces for our known interest. And that includes the 5 from Barterra and Vittoria. So that just gives you an idea of what we would be left with downtown parking. And now we'd like to answer any of your clarifying questions and then move forward, public comment and discussion, our next steps. We're really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Thank you. I particularly appreciate that comparison of the widths of the streets. Because when I first looked at this, I thought, oh, Half Moon Bay is so much smaller than San Mateo and San Carlos. And then you look at the, Google Earth, everything, and it really is pretty similar. So it was good. It's good to have the numbers in front of me. So thank you for doing that. Commissioner Benjamin, can you start us off?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Joe, and thank you for the presentation. I thought it was very helpful, and I thought the staff report was also very helpful. And I guess my first question is kind of scope related, so that I'm sure as I think about this, I'm delivering the right focus of comments and not putting time into places where you're not looking for it. My grasp is that our primary goal here is, our charge is to implement the general plan and the ordinance. And so I'm thinking about how this fits with that. There are some aesthetic elements brought into that, but I'm thinking about noise and safety and coastal access and hazards and things like that. Am I heading in the right direction? Those are the kinds of things you're looking for, or is it a broader scope? How do we feel about the softer elements?
So I'm going to jump in here a little bit on that. Jill and I discussed putting up policies out of your land use plan tonight, but we were really wanting to focus on kind of the scale of the program and the components of it. But for a coastal development permit for the type of program that staff is intending to present to the Planning Commission, we will bring you a full analysis with all the findings that you would expect to see related to your land use plan and your general plan elements. And Commissioner Benjamin, all of those things are exactly the kinds of things that we're going to be looking to. In particular, the development chapter of your land use plan includes a town center section, including a heritage downtown section with policies that are very supportive of improving the visitor experience and the sidewalk environment. So you will see those kind of proposals there. It's also why we're brought you a cap for parking space conversion, because we know that parking is sensitive in our coastal zone, and we're trying to find the right balance between enhancing the pedestrian space and maintaining more than adequate parking for residents and visitors. So noise as well, hours of operation tend to be how we address noise in these kinds of settings, as well as thinking about amplified music, and we have permitting rules around that. And in fact, I think we should, I don't think we hit amplified music in all of our bullet points in the draft program that we gave to you. So definitely, long answer. We could have presented that tonight. We just thought we should wait till the next session, but maybe we should have given that to you now. Your staff report hit it a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I didn't see them. I didn't think it was because you weren't thinking about it, but it made me wonder whether that was too hard an edge to bring in tonight. So it sounds like you'll take it if we have it on offer. Okay, thank you.
And just to jump in and piggyback on what Jill said, also in that program that you guys have in your staff report attachments, it does outline, like you said, hours of operations, noise, as well as the design for site visibility and safety. So we've really lined out as much as we could through there. I think, we're definitely on the same page here.
That answer your question? Okay. Vice Chair Hernandez, you're there. You have your hand up. The floor is yours.
I'd like to go back to the presentation and I'm just trying to get the sense of the scale of the downtowns. So when you looked at Broadway and Redwood City and Burlingame Avenue, are you saying those streets are about 70 feet across or 80 feet across?
So it really depends on what the classified right of way is. So for instance, Redwood City on Broadway is actually an 80-foot right of way per San Mateo County GIS. So it is a little bit different compared to what we have on Main Street as a 70-foot right of way. But what we did was measure from kind of building to building. So we measured from building face to the edge of the sidewalk to the edge of the parking lane to the center lane of the roadway, and then so on. Similar to Burlingame, we kind of measured the same exact way. Again, building to building, but in that case, it was a 70-foot right of way. Similar to... Sorry.
So the sidewalks, the streets and the sidewalks in Half Moon Bay are 70 feet from wall to wall, basically.
Yes, approximately right there. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm familiar with some of the sections Jill was citing earlier in terms of our, the objectives we have in our land use plan. I noticed that improving the viability of downtown businesses, improving visitor serving offerings, and increase. Yeah, those two things in particular weren't included as goals of the project. Was that a conscious decision or something that you guys are thinking about adding in later? Maybe that's to Joe.
Yeah, it was a conscious decision. It's definitely something that we could take a look at, but essentially right now with this study session, it's really, we wanted to keep it a little bit more generalized just to get a little bit more feedback from you guys. Not so much into the LCP, but it's definitely something we can bring into the next round.
Okay, so are we only restricting this to cafes and like restaurants, or could you put something like cornhole or chess sets painted on the sidewalk? Could you have other types of things that are there to draw people in?
So when I originally met, I've done a lot of outreach on this, and I actually met with the Downtown Business Association several times. I've met with other businesses that aren't just cafes or dining areas to see what their interest would be for something like outdoor retail or something else. And really, I didn't get very much response of interest. Most people had more concerns with staffing, They just didn't see an opportunity for their businesses to be able to kind of capitalize on this program. So originally, whenever we were drafting this, we had that in mind. But once we really didn't get much interest, it just made the most sense for us to dial it back to parklets and cafes, because that's where we know we have the interest.
So let's say you have limited space and multiple restaurants who are applicants. How do you decide who gets to use a parklet? How do you prioritize one over the other?
We've essentially, the idea has been a first come, first served basis. And a lot of that we have determined off of funding that we have available for these, these establishments that may want to utilize what we have. We only have a limited amount. So ideally, if we have 10 parklets that want to be developed and the 11th comes in at the 11th hour, essentially it's first come, first serve. This is how we've originally decided it. Now we can always rediscover that and discuss it, but that was ideally where we came from.
Do you mind if I just want to slip in on a couple of these answers, just because there were a few other things that staff looked at. We did look at the distribution of the restaurants, and Joe's hands-on knowledge in meeting with all of the restaurateurs and cafe owners and their interests. And frankly, we found a very helpful pattern of distribution. And so we're frankly hopeful that those who would want to do this there would be capacity within that proposed 20% limit, and this program could have some monitoring associated with it, where if things change and we need to make some adjustments, we could do that. But right now, your restaurants are really quite peppered about and not focused on one block or two blocks, where you're seeing, other cities where they're closing a block because they have so many restaurants in a row, and they're allowing all of them to have parklets, and they're essentially losing their sidewalks and moving people to the pedestrians into the street and taking out the cars. And we just really don't have a block like that. So that was part of it. And then you asked about the other uses. In addition to what Joe heard from our different businesses, I do want to remind everybody, because it's a little minutia in your zoning code, there's allowances now in the zoning code for administrative approvals for temporary uses on the sidewalk and potentially in the street. So if there was somebody who wanted to have a cornhole event or something else that was short term and it wasn't covered in this program, we could permit it now, and outdoor retail as well. Now, if the commission, through your discussion tonight, decides that the scope of this program should be broadened, we're happy to go back and visit that. We did a whole version of this with considering outside retail and other uses. So we're happy to reconsider it. It's just we didn't get any demand.
Okay, I have one last follow-up question. Is there any thought been put into, well, what do you do if we have another situation where businesses are adamantly opposed to parklets because they think it will impact their type of business? So maybe you have a business that's dependent on short-term parking, such as a candy shop or a bakery. Have you thought about how to address that by maybe increasing short-term parking in those areas or having some other type of mitigation? Is that something you've thought about?
Now we have talked about an appeals period for this, but we have put thought into it. Yes, we're still kind of milling that over of what negative feedback we may get from these businesses, if any.
Okay.
Yeah, we need more information about that, so I'm glad you brought it up, Vice Chair Hernandez. Joe has been meeting with the downtown business group and also communicating with the chamber. We absolutely hope that we'll hear from a few folks tonight, and it is per the reason why we're having a study session and not bringing this to you in a hearing format. So thanks for that. We've got that one on our list.
Back to you, Chairman.
You got all your questions answered? Are you good, Vice Chair Hernandez?
I am. Thank you.
Commissioner Reddick, you have any questions?
I don't have any clarifying questions. Thanks.
I had one question, which is, I know the parklets, for instance, in San Francisco are permanent, that the city put them in. But in San Mateo, I believe they're temporary. San Carlos, I think they're temporary. Redwood City, I think they're permanent. Do you guys know? I assume that we're talking about temporary here, and that they change as restaurants change, as businesses change, as demands change. But right. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, the intent of this program is essentially to allow for a semi-permanent, and I say semi-permanent meaning a well-developed structure of a good parklet, but something that can be moved, or something that can be taken down, or would also have in our license agreement a lifetime of maybe 1 to 2 years, or 2 years with a review at the second year to see if there's an additional year, whatever. But that's what we'll put in the license agreement to make sure that this permanency is actually not permanent. And in the event, I'm thinking maybe this is where you're going with it, with your question, like in the event maybe a restaurant closes down or something and they had a parklet, if something else were to pop up, where they'd be able to have that grandfathered in, where no, that wouldn't be the intent. They would have to go through the process as well. But that's where we left it so far, is to make sure that we have that in that standard agreement, license agreement for a time. As a matter of fact, you guys have already had the Bartera and Fatoria parklet, and so you guys are well aware that after a certain period, whenever there's the improvements that are done to the crosswalk and Main Street Bridge, they may have to remove it and then be able to put it back up. So we want to make sure that it's permanent, but not fixated permanence.
And so my question really is the other cities that are doing this, because they look so good in San Carlos and San Mateo, and are those all also temporary? I mean, they basically came up because of COVID. Do you know about those, or is that? I personally don't know that much on certain cities. I know that some cities have implemented new programs to allow for them to be more permanent, but permanency meaning several years, not the lifetime of the building. But other cities, I'm not as familiar. Okay, thank you.
It can pop in just for a minute. Sure. You'll find the most permanent piece of such installation when a city allows for the actual extension of the sidewalk. And so there's a new sidewalk curb and gutter line. And it's, truly, you'd have to jackhammer that out and replace it someday to put in parking again. That's pretty permanent. That's a big step forward. Most of what we're seeing are platform built up to the grade of the curb, and they accommodate drainage. And there's a number of them that we're seeing in San Carlos in particular, where they've really created they're almost fully enclosed. They have 3 sides and a ceiling at this point. They're with windscreen, so it functions like a window, and it's really a very different approach. I would still consider those to be semi-permanent. They're, for the most part, I don't think they relied on extended sidewalks. I think they're on built up flooring. But clearly there's an intent for them to be there for quite a few years. So you'll see both. And the intent here is that our operators would, our businesses would really benefit from them. The customers would like them, and they'll take great care of them, and they'll be here for years, for as long as it is, you know, able to work with it. And you'll see some older parklets. I don't know. I must have pre-COVID parklets were a thing. This isn't new because of COVID. There's lots of them out there, and they've been running for years and years in a lot of our different towns. So we're happy to go and learn more about any of them that you've noticed in other cities. And Jonathan did that good work today on just really looking at right-of-way widths. We've been curious about some of the feedback we've had that, oh, there just isn't enough room on Main Street. And there can be. So we hope that that made you feel better. What we'd encourage you to do after this meeting is go walk some of those blocks in those other towns to get a sense of the scale of what's there.
Well, and I walked them on Google Earth, so and they are actually very similar. So we want to open up, if everyone's done, we want to open up to public comment. Bridget, I assume we have people who want to talk on this. So I will open public comment now. And we'll...
Looks like we have one person raising their hand so far. Let me just get over here and I will let him or her in. Okay, I have Joe Poncini, sorry. Let me promote him. Okay. You're on mute, so you can unmute Mr. Poncini and then you can speak.
Thank you, Bridget. Pacini, just for the record.
Pacini, thank you.
No problem at all. So I have a couple of questions, but first of all, I'd just like to address, the general state of the parklet and what it's done for our business. I mean, honestly, we survived due to the use of the parklet during COVID. We're a very, very small, if none of you have ever visited us, very small 50-seat indoor restaurant on the south, very, very quiet end of Main Street that has not been all that too successful for restaurants in the past. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary, surviving the 2-year COVID or almost 2-year COVID. And the parklets have been very beneficial. I thank Joe Butcher for all his hand-on work coming to us and helping us out with all of this. I appreciate all of your comments as well, Bridget, and I would just like to express to, the others who haven't really seen the value of the parklet in Half Moon Bay, because honestly, I don't see that many out there. I really do think that more businesses could benefit from a really quality parklet. However, I did have a couple of questions for Joe, who mentioned, and I know I have limited time, so I wanted to get to these before I expired that time. Joe, you mentioned mandatory requirements for barriers, and also you mentioned license agreements. And I wanted to talk about that, and then to expand on that, permanency, which was briefly touched on in the later moments. So I guess, Joe, if you could touch on the mandatory requirements you're thinking of, as well as license agreements.
We usually have public comment, and then staff can clarify.
Okay.
So if you have any other comments, continue, and then we'll.
No, well, I do have comments. The permanency would be amazing, but once again, we have a very lightly built parklet, but would love to build a more permanent structure. But that also requires putting in permanent things into the street structure, and that's not what we're allowed to do at this point in the game. So would definitely like to see that happen, especially for our quiet end of Main Street, where the parking slots go not diagonally but vertically, and one parking spot we fit 6 tables in, and those 6 tables produce a ton of income for one parking space.
And Mr. Piccini,
yes,
what's the business?
Sacrilege Brewery.
Okay, I thought that's what it was. Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
That's your comments. No, that's great.
So, okay, well, I'd see if there's anyone else that needs to speak. I don't see anyone else raising their hands, so I'm going to go ahead and move you back, Mr. Piccini, over to the public, and also you're able to write your comments into the city as well for staff to get more feedback too, so feel free to do that. Thanks.
Okay.
Is there anyone else?
I have no one else.
That's surprising.
Oh, maybe one. Hold on. Let me just do some moving here. Hold on. I have M. Gossett.
Hello, my name is Margaret Gossett. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I just want to thank staff for working on this project. I'm a resident in town, and I was pleased to see some of the small parklets that opened up in the last couple of years. And I'm so glad that you are considering this to support some of the local businesses. I think it's a really cool feature for our downtown that will service both the residents and our visitors. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like anyone else? I don't have anyone raising their hands.
Is there anyone else out in the audience who wants to comment? Okay, I'm going to close public session, and we will take it to the Planning Commission. Commissioner Benjamin, who is up?
Whoops. Okay. I'll try to stay ahead of the mute button for a change tonight. So I appreciate the public comments. I had some questions that I felt like I needed to bring up, but didn't want to be judgy. So now I want to ask them with the understanding that I'm still not being judgy. I just didn't want them to be misconstrued. And my first one pertains to the principle that we do not make a gift of public funds. And I understand that parklets don't necessarily do that. We see them in many sections of the state. So they obviously have withstood a test. And I'm trying to understand where the line is that helps us understand what policies we might adopt around parklets that ensure that we are giving fair treatment to all of the public. So the dimensions that come to mind from where I sit are the public use of the site versus it being restricted to the business that applied for it, the potential for another business to come along and want to have a parklet when the amount of space is expired. So is there a level of first mover advantage that represents somehow a franchise of public benefit that goes beyond what the Constitution of the state provides? To be clear, I'm not being hostile to the idea. I just want to understand what our constraints are so that we can exercise good judgment. And rather than dwelling on other topics, maybe I can start with that and then pick up. Is that okay?
I'm sure. That sounds fine. I think the staff is kind of looking for, in particular, the big issues of our parking and public use. And I think they're, if I'm reading you right, that's what you most want to hear. But I think, definitely.
I think we should address this through the chair. We can. Looks like the deputy city attorney also has some thoughts on this, and I don't know which one of us wants to go first, but usually better when she cleans up my mess. So we'll go that way. So first of all, the license agreement is a tool for where the city would charge an applicant for an annual fee for use of the right of way. And there are different ways to value that. There's definitely we've done research on fair market value for parking spaces. I will say straight off with the sidewalk cafe space, I would recommend not charging very much for that space. It's space that really is not being altered as significantly as what a parklet is doing, which is replacing public parking with space that could be used by primarily an individual business. But for the actual parklet spaces, we are going to propose fees, and we want it to be done on a really fair across the board basis for the value of the area. And we believe we need city council input for that. And so it's what its value is and how that's actually imposed, I would suggest is not really a coastal development permit issue. But it is important, and I'm glad you brought it up. And we just want people to know that we're not planning to just give all the parking away. That said, most cities don't. You'd be surprised what they're charging for these spaces in other towns, and we've been looking into it. We'll have more information when this decision is needing to be considered by City Council. And whatever else our Deputy City Attorney has.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add at a very high level, the doctrine of gift of public funds is not quite so specific, really. If there's a public benefit to what you're doing, then it's not a gift of public funds. And as Jill pointed out, there will be fees associated, but I think part of the discussion tonight is also just what the balance between the public benefit and the private benefit that is sort of inherent in this parklet program. But I think the idea, at least from staff's perspective, is that this is designed to provide the public, not just the private restaurant owners, but the public also will get some added benefit in terms of revitalized or vitalized, not necessarily revitalized, downtown areas.
And I know one of the questions that we talked about in conjunction with Parklet that we discussed a couple of meetings ago was the balance of how much time it would be for the exclusive use of the business versus being available for other visitors. So there's an aspect of public benefit that has nothing to do with the economic value to the city. It's strictly coastal access, visitor serving where they're not buying a lunch or a dinner. And I don't pretend to know the answer, and I readily acknowledge that there's a policy question that should be decided by the city council with respect to where to draw that line. But from the planning commission standards perspective, if it's going to be consistent with the LCP, we need to know how to interpret it with respect to our obligations to respect the Constitution and to manage visitor serving benefits. That's the only reason I'm putting that into the conversation now. So I certainly am not, I don't know what the answer should be. You know, my gut level feeling is I would be disappointed if I saw signs outside of reasonable dinner hours or lunch hours that said you can't be in this. But you know, if it were in the public area. Another topic that interested me here was noise, because it's me, and noise is one of my things. And I know that our experience with outdoor dining establishments or outdoor businesses in general, we can look at the farmers market where we have live music, at the cafe, at the San Benito House, we've had live music, and like the amount of parking that we occupy with parklets, there's a cumulative impact, right? At some point, the streetscape becomes full of musical entertainment, perhaps, or the bubble machine, music that's piped in, or something like that. And I'm unclear on what our standard would be with respect to that, especially over hours. I'm guessing, we could generalize and look to our noise ordinance that gives us some ideas about what we'd be willing to tolerate. And to be fair, that's a part of a dining experience that, I wouldn't necessarily want to discount. But we have outdoor dining now that's pretty quiet. People walk on the street and they have a quiet night kind of experience. And I think we'd be making a conscious decision, depending on what policies we would want to build around the permits, to either alter that or leave it the way it is. And I'm interested in what your thinking is about how you'd like the sonic downtown landscape, the soundscape, I guess you could say, to work.
So do you, Steph, want to answer that, or do we want to just get some ideas?
Yeah, I'm happy to give my laundry list. I'm just putting those out as and I realize these are complicated questions. I'm not going to take my answer standing on one foot here. Right. So it's okay. Maybe it would be better if I just keep going then.
That's okay with me. Yeah.
Okay. So I also am thinking about the long term because we are a planning commission, and we expect our downtown to grow, become more populous. We want our businesses to serve, to do a better job of serving more people, because that's part of our long-term plan for downtown and the boulevard. And at some point, we could easily imagine, I think, more demand for parklets or more outdoor serving. And I wonder if there's some point where our model shifts from what we're proposing now, which is occupying a few spaces, to saying, you know what, we have so much demand that, for these kind of parklet ideas, that we should be thinking about changing our traffic flow, because doing that many could impact the traffic flow, and maybe, have more of a paseo kind of area with side streets carrying back and forth traffic longitudinally, or how it interacts with bicycles. And I'm unclear on how we think about this asymptotically. It's okay for us not to know, but I think we should have a model that says, we don't think that we're anywhere near that threshold now, but at some point, maybe we become that. And it would be good to have an idea so that we know that. I've been talking a long time, so I'm just going to cut myself off now and let the other colleagues speak.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea. We can come back. There's a lot of things to bring up. Everybody has their hand up. I'm not sure who was first, but can we give it to Commissioner Reddick, please?
Well, I think Rick was first to be accurate.
And Vice Chair Hernandez, you were quicker.
I am happy to let Commissioner Reddick go first. I'm also happy to speak, but I just, happy to have Commissioner Reddick there.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hernandez. I applaud city staff and Joe and Jonathan in particular for moving this project forward. I've in the last 5 years, dating back even before I was on this planning commission, I have seen several presentations from California cities where they presented data and to demonstrate the beneficial effects that parklets and related things had on their downtown areas, improving the vibrant nature of the downtown area, the shopping areas, traffic calming. In at least one case, had data showing that people stuck around and visited more retail shops thanks to the parklets. So I think they're starting from a point where many people, when you first hear about this, if you're in retail, you bemoan the necessary loss of a few parking places. I think that as time goes by, it's much more clear about the benefits of these things. And I think Half Moon Bay, our heritage downtown, lends itself well to experiencing some of these benefits. And I would love to see this program move along rapidly so that our retailers could be enjoying the benefits of this sooner rather than later. We're in many ways trying to support the economic rebound of our downtown businesses, and I think this would be a great thing to add to that. So along those lines, I hope that we can all challenge ourselves to do the proper amount of thinking and scoping on this project. City staff well knows, I'm sure, that when you're inventing a program like this for the first time, it requires great thoughtfulness and care to get it right the first time. So we shouldn't be less comprehensive and thoughtful than we have to. But what I'd like to say is, can we challenge ourselves to not be even more thoughtful and comprehensive than we have to? Can we keep this as simple, in the famous words of Commissioner Benjamin, keep it as simple as possible while not being simpler than necessary? And I hope that in the phase of inventing the plan and getting it approved, can move quickly. In the same vein, I hope that as you think about the permitting processes and such, let's make it as less onerous on our retailers as we can, again, without being sloppy about it. I think it'd be great if this could be in place within a few months, come the busy summer season down here. I think that would be great. When I saw Joe's introductory slides, I couldn't help but flash back to our long process with the short-term rental program, and I think we saw there can be a temptation to get infinitely detailed when setting up such a thing, and I for one pledge to not go further than we have to. So I hope that makes sense. On some more mundane things, public use of the parklets when not directly being used during meal times by a restaurant, for instance, I think is a no-brainer. We have to do that. It would be silly to try to to make sure those are empty in the middle of the afternoon. I'd love to see the public be able to make good use of that. I think I remember correctly that the Cafe Society application was to be largely funded by that retailer, but open to people who've got a sandwich or a cup of coffee from any old place to go in there. So that, and I know the Fatoria one is different, and that's okay, but there may be more than one model there. And maybe there ought to be a different fee associated with those two models. Joe, this is probably a question for you. If I read the draft of the plan correctly, it said that we wouldn't have parklets facing each other across the street from each other, that they would be staggered. And I'm not exactly sure. I'd like to hear why that makes sense. You know, it seems to me the parklets do not extend into the driving lanes any further than the existing parking places do. And we obviously have parking places on both the east and west sides of Main Street. So am I right that the recommendation is not to have parklets face each other? And if so, why? And I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
I had to unmute here. I mean, I think ideally, whenever you look at parklets that could be across from each other, it does tend to take up, you know, obviously a larger scale of parking areas in that block. But I don't think that's something that we're actually going to really run into. If you really look at block by block where our restaurants are, we really don't have any that would even line up that way to be able to occupy that space. So it would be kind of staggered anyway. And again, with what we've, you know, with what I've personally have talked to these businesses about and the interest, even hypothetically, if we had all of our food, you know, our cafes and restaurants that wanted to do a parklet, it still wouldn't really line up to have any facing each other. So this just kind of eliminates taking up a concentrated area for parking.
Okay, thank you.
Elaborate on that as well.
Does that answer your question?
Staff is going to ask Commissioner to help us find that citation. I can't remember writing that. So I'll try to find it later, but I think we'll take a fine-tooth comb over that, because the intent is that the space would not be a conflict. And so I'm not sure if we were talking about them being distributed or staggered because that's just how the restaurants are. Because I don't think we intended to demand that through a design requirement or encourage it through a guideline. So we'll cross back on that one.
Yeah. Thank you for that. If I misread that, I apologize.
I don't know. I can't. You find things that I forget about, so just let me know.
Thanks.
All right, Vice Chair Hernandez, you've been very patient.
Well, with all these wonderful comments, it's easy to be patient. So I am very supportive of this program. I think that along the lines of Commissioner Ruddick's comments, I'd like to see us take a phased approach. Hey, let's do what we can do now. Let's do it quickly. Let's do it intelligently. There's a lot of thought that's already gone into this. We've got some interesting precedents. So I would like to see us move with due haste to get something in place. That said, we should have an eye to the future. And the big question I have is, how does a parklet policy fit into a town boulevard concept that's part of our LCP, right? I mean, are we thinking of this is where our town boulevard is going to be? But that doesn't have to be part of a phase one. Town boulevard is a long time off, but I think it's an important part of what we need to think about. Part of the reason why I'm very supportive of parklets is I view them as a public good. It increases the traffic to the downtown. It increases visitor serving, and we have a lot of obligations in our LCP that are for visitor serving services. And we also have a lot of policies that are about concentrating development in the downtown core. So there's no better place to do this. And if you've ever enjoyed a refreshing IPA at Sacrilege at Joe Pacini's restaurant in that parklet, you will certainly appreciate the nice space that's there and the environment that it creates. And I think we would all be enriched by having more people enjoy the downtown. I think the city staff should consider, I know this is something where, the applicant or the owner of the permit has to pay the permit fee every year. But I do think we should consider something, if it's not going to be permanent, there should be a time-bound constraint so that, if somebody else moves in, builds a business, just as an act of fairness, that they have a right to participate in the parklet program. So we're not permanently excluding people. That said, I do think longer term, to Mr. Piccini's point, we should have policies for permanent parklets. It might make sense. And I think it's something we can look at longer term. When I look at places like Palo Alto, Redwood City, or San Francisco, I look at these parklets. They totally enrich the downtown, and I know that sometimes in Redwood City, for example, they have structured parking garages that are multi-story, and they have other parking places that are set aside. It's still a little tricky to find parking there. So I know that we always, the local businesses are going to be concerned about, if I'm not a restaurant, if I am a bakery, if I am the type of business where somebody drops in and heads out quickly, they may be impacted. So I would consider some short-term parking, more short-term parking for businesses like Cunha's, for businesses like, the bakery, where people run in, quickly go get a couple of things and then get out. Just want to make sure that that's accessible. I know Cunha's does have their own dedicated parking, but, I take advantage of that 15-minute parking in front of Cunha's quite often. And I'm not going to lie, I eat a lot of those donuts over at the Half Moon Bay Bakery. So, we want to make sure that folks can get in and get out and those businesses aren't adversely impacted. So I just think about how you approach those areas and have some sensitivity to the businesses that would be most impacted. I think that's an important thing for me. So I know you as a staff, you guys are thinking through a lot of these things, and there's some gnarly questions on there that need to be addressed. But overall, this is a big public benefit. And the thing I would consider is, if somebody's not actively using the parklet for their business, maybe then, have that business put up some free. Leaving chairs and tables out that people can steal is kind of a pain, right, for a business to bear. But maybe have something like cornhole or other types of games that can be put up there, something to entertain the public in that public space, a putting green, whatever it is, so that, the public does get to have a benefit from this parklet above and beyond just using it as a parking spot. The other thing I'll mention is just the same aesthetics we went through with Barterra. Get rid of the stripes, just do things to make it look like it's a little less shabby, a little nicer looking. Those are all things that we should consider. Those are my comments.
Thank you. I was very happy to see this come up when we talked about Barterra and approved that little parklet. There were a lot of issues that came up, and there was a letter that was distributed to planning commissioners that Janice Solomino, I think her name was, and she just raised a lot of really good issues about policy. And obviously that kind of hit a nerve with you guys as well, because we're talking about it now. So thank you for doing that. I guess the things that I would sort of look for is, I do think there should be a time limit on the businesses. I don't know if 2 years is enough, because they're putting in a substantial amount of money to set that up in the first place. Maybe it would be 3 years. I don't know. But what happens is that businesses, it becomes just part of, it increases their property values. They end up, a small place like Barterra that then, I don't know about doubles its tables, but increases its tables significantly. they become the only ones on the block who have that advantage. And so it kind of does become permanent. And so I think a time limit kind of gives you a chance to look at how the neighborhood changes and what other restaurants come in, maybe giving other restaurants a chance to take over a parklet or move a parklet if that's a possibility. And the other thing is the public use, which is like it's great to say that the public can use it when it's not being used by the business, but again, in practical terms, what I've seen in San Mateo and San Carlos is they just shut those things down. Like the owners rope them off. They put the chairs up on the tables, and there's no way to use those. The message is loud and clear, and I understand why, because they don't want a bunch of people sort of squatting in their spot, and then they have to like roust them and be like police to get either transients or someone, people who are just who won't leave. And so I don't know the answer to the public use part of this. I do think that there needs to be stipulated that there is some public use, but I don't know really how to enforce that. And I think that could also be sort of a headache both for the parklet person, the owner, and for the city. So maybe somebody else has some ideas about that. And then parking, which Vice Chair Hernandez brought up. It's like when you talk to downtown business owners, it's the number one thing. They always want more parking, even though I know there's parking right around the corner, right down the street. Everybody always talks about how there's not enough parking. And I know that that's been a big issue for the city, and we tried to get some signage, move people out. But that should definitely be, that's obviously what killed the one out in front of the Arcos, whatever the name of his place is. It was parking. So, again, I don't know the answer to that, but maybe someone else does. But I think in terms of a policy decision, those are the two things to me that really stand out. Is like, how do you ensure public use? What does that look like? And same thing with the parking. Okay, I'm done. Maybe 20% is too much. Again, I don't know who had their hand up first. Commissioner Benjamin, I guess, take a turn.
Sure. So I agree with everything that I heard from my colleagues, and I just want to assure Commissioner Ruddick that I am not interested in dropping an anchor and forcing this process to drag, against the demands of perfection. I think that these are questions that need to be thought through, but not that I want them to put a stop to things. My concern is that, as Vice Chair Hernandez mentioned, perhaps there's got to be some way for someone to come later to be able to participate in some way that enhances the resilience of the businesses on the block. Or as you and Commissioner Gorn said, some way for the public to be engaged. So I want to assure you that I'm not interested in, I think it's a great idea and I want to see it move forward. But I do think that these are topics that we have to think hard about before we can move forward. There was a section in the discussion of the permit about bringing something that seemed kind of like a variance, where there could be a permit that didn't quite comply with all the standards. So it was complying enough that staff wouldn't just outright reject the proposed parklet, but it was, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for using the V word. So maybe there's some other right word to use. But the idea is that there would be some issue of conformance and staff would bring it to the Planning Commission sort of in an exceptional way for us to think about whether that's okay with us. And I don't know, I'm trying to visualize like a for instance to help me understand how that would work in a way that we would look at it and say, yeah, well, this one can stick out in the street, or, you know, well, this one doesn't actually have to provide as much public use, or this one, and you know, I'm bringing out ridiculous examples because I know that's not what you have in mind, but I'm struggling to understand what it might look like so I can understand why we would, you know, and maybe it's just an unanticipated thing that we never thought about, that the coastal development permit for the program, which is supposed to be broad enough to accommodate all of these kinds of permits, is just something that we need to revise to think through. To me, it's the breadth of the permitting that we are contemplating here that makes it feel like we really, really have to think it right. Because once it gets started, it's going to be challenging to modify.
Vice Chair Hernandez.
The point I wanted to make with Redwood City and parking is it can be painful to get parking there, but if you look at the viability of downtown of Broadway in Redwood City in that area, it's amazing. It's off the charts. I mean, those businesses have really thrived with parklets and the flexibility that the city of Redwood City has put in place. And, you know, we would benefit from that example. So I do think there is an impact to parking. I do think we should find ways to help people, but I am very supportive of what's been proposed here. I think it's already very thoughtful. I would also say, you know, regarding Commissioner Ruddick's comment about, hey, are we going to have these offset or not? I think making things too complicated for the applicant, I would sort of eschew that and just really go with, hey, simple policies, make it straightforward, you know, be flexible, be consistent where you can, and, you know, have it be time bound. Those are the things that really matter to me. And I don't know what the right time is. I don't know how to balance those things. And I do think at a later date, you should be considering things like permanent parklets, maybe making some modifications. I think we have an opportunity to improve downtown, which is a major policy consideration. This looks like a great first step forward.
Thanks. And Commissioner Benjamin, you know, we never got to your laundry list. Oops, you're muted again.
My hand is up, but I wanted to get a place in line, but I realized that I just spoke a moment ago. So anxious to hear Commissioner Ruddick and you again.
Commissioner Ruddick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Gorin. I just wanted to echo Vice Chair Hernandez's comments about Redwood City, but parking there is not always trivial and obvious, but it is a tremendous and vibrant neighborhood that's created there. And somebody said earlier, this concept of park once and walk and shop and dine in multiple places is really what the modern and future downtown has to do, I think, and I want us to be a part of that. The question of, I may have oversimplified my opinion about public use of the parklets, because you know, you certainly can imagine that, well, the city is turning public right-of-way into a space for the benefit of a business or maybe a couple or a few businesses. So the city ought to have a right to make sure that the public gets to use that to the extent that is consistent with the retailer's use. At the same time, if the retailers have investments in infrastructure there, tables and chairs and plantings and such, then as Chair Gorin was outlining a few minutes ago, they have a reasonable desire to not see that stuff walk off, or have permanent camp. So I realize that is a nuanced question. In an ideal world, maybe it could come to pass that the basic parklets is something where the public use is encouraged and allowed, but there's a way to protect the retailers' rightful interest in whatever infrastructure they've invested in. And if I can come up with more helpful examples of how that might work in the real world, I'll chime in later. But thank you for the chance to clarify that.
Thank you. The one other thing that was mentioned in the letter that was sent around to us is was an idea for shared parklets on the main cross streets. And obviously that would involve city money, which I know is maybe a little problematic, but from a planning point of view, how possible is that? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, now we're queuing up all the things that we want to make sure that we are responsive to. Is this time to do a few of those, or should we wait?
We do have the end of the laundry list from.
Okay, let's get the whole basket. Yeah.
Okay. You're muted. We can't hear your dirty socks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was reducing the noise from my forklift by being on mute. So these topics are great, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness. Thank you for understanding that I'm not trying to be a wet blanket here. So I had two reactions to that public-private question that Steve mentioned earlier. And all of us have spoken on to some degree, and it dovetails also with Vice Chair Hernandez's comments about parking. And it finally speaks to my sort of thinking about beginning with the end in mind, sort of understanding what the asymptote of our use of these spaces will be as demand increases. To that end, I want to look at places where those uses have matured a lot. In addition to the ones that we looked at in the staff review, I would respectfully submit that we look at the evolution of the public spaces that are now Mountain View on Castro Street. When I moved here in 1980, when I moved to California, Castro Street reminded me a lot of Main Street today. It had limited, some use on the sidewalks, but mostly the businesses were interior. They had a wider right-of-way, I think, than we did. But there was some nice evolution in that space. At some point, they took the plunge and really narrowed the right-of-way, really widened the sidewalk, and they really extended, they provided for the availability of parking through large-scale multi-level parking lot development just a couple of blocks off of Castro. And we're many years, if not decades, from that. But I think we should understand that the demand for coastal resource recreation is going to grow. And if we plan in a way that forecloses those opportunities, we have done our successors in these jobs that we do a disservice. So I hope that we can look at the way that evolved and ask ourselves if there's some organic way that we can get to something like that, or something that's more custom, that's more appropriate for us, but provides the opportunity to grow to accommodate that demand that doesn't exist today and is not fundable today. But we need to provide the planning space for it to work in the future. That's the challenge I'm trying to get to. With respect to how the public how the space that's available for a dining activity takes place, and then it becomes public at other times. I want to speak to the small towns of France, because they often have public spaces in their the areas next to their shops. They typically set up their tables and their tents and partition out their space when they are serving, and they get moved back in the time that they're not working. Once again, becomes available to the public. That's one model I have seen. Another model I have seen is that near the corners, there is often some kind of public art that provides a place where people can congregate and enjoy it's where they sit to have their ice cream snack that they got. They're sitting by the fountain, and I suppose that, MacDutra Park might be an approximation, something that could aspire to be that kind of place. But you would find it every few blocks in an evolved downtown area like that. So I think that there's room for providing for visitor serving businesses that are not asking for a public space that's dedicated for them to provide the restaurant experience that could still add value and vibrancy to the community, that actually very easily adapts to the public-private model that we're looking for. And I'm not suggesting it instead of the restaurant experience. I'm suggesting it in addition to the restaurant experience. So thank you for letting me get that stuff out. And then just since you asked me to bring the rest of my basket, I was envisioning the other things that you might want in a Half Moon Bay outdoor dining experience to really make it delightful for the guests. We had talked about, I think there was a reference to the heaters. In an era of global warming, we might want misters as well. And so I would imagine that there'd be some opportunity to think about or fans. And there's some space where they become a little too heavy duty, but I can see things that might be really nice that would provide a distinct experience. Probably as they become more permanent, those become more relevant. And I think, the question of music that we talked about earlier fits into that space, whether it's live or it's recorded. I don't know. But those principles seem to need a balance as well. So yeah, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess the one other thing that I would sort of stress is that Joe mentioned that there was no real interest in anything outside of sidewalk cafes and restaurants, and I understand that. That makes sense. I would say as you're sort of mapping out the policy and how you want to frame this, that today there's no interest, but there may be interest later in I don't know what, bike shop, or I have no idea. But there should be some room in the plan to include businesses that are not sidewalk cafes and restaurants. That's all. Does anybody else have anything they want to add before we get to staff? Is there? Okay. Jill, is there anything that you didn't answer that you might want to answer?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Chair. Your segue, that was my first bullet point. I wanted to make sure that we circled back and got your input on the scope of the program. We didn't hear any comments about the program area. We did hear comments about the uses that could be accommodated. So we're going to add that to the list of things to circle back to. you asked about the idea of shared parklets on cross streets, and Commissioner Benjamin brought up some long-term thinking about what may happen over time in downtown with, for example, maybe what I'm seeing here in his summary might be the result of a new streetscape or circulation plan, or the city developing a shared parking facility, something big changing, a big change. And in all of those things that you've brought up, the idea of public-private space, shared space in your corners, et cetera, can be accommodated in design like that. It's way beyond the scope of what we're bringing to you for this parklet program. This program would really probably be set aside in such a circumstance if a streetscape was being redesigned to have a whole bunch of new kinds of public pocket space or who knows what right now. So I think staff has tried to bring you a program that is pragmatic to what we have now and is thoughtful about growth over time modestly. It's not a big wow. It's not meant to be a big transformative, whole new Half Moon Bay downtown. It's meant to do a lot of good now for the businesses that are there now and interested and have needs and are frankly suffering with some real challenges with our economy. So I hope that you're comfortable with that. This program could be fully eclipsed by those kinds of projects in the future, and that would be okay. It would be a wonderful thing to have those opportunities and that level of design and investment, the design that I know the planners who did the design in Mountain View, the Friedman Hungen Bottomley design with their dining terrace, they did work that I worked with the same firm in Redwood City. These are really big, exciting projects. Burlingame has one of the most recent streetscape changes. You saw in that section, they're fabulously wide sidewalks. They don't have very many parklets because their sidewalks are wide enough now for proper, real cafe space. So, we don't want to disappoint you. And we don't want you to think we haven't thought about some of these things. And we love the inspiration. But this is really kind of in a scope of what you can accommodate now. Let's see, let's go back. We will bring back a few things. We're going to study some more things that you brought up tonight. We knew that the public-private use topic was going to be rich. Joe's nodding his head. We talked about this a lot. And we'll talk to our businesses too. We have found some parklets in some cities are really set up for exclusive use. And that was their expectation, remembering that the businesses are the ones who are doing the installation. That said, Commissioner Ruddick is right on about the application that we had from Cafe Society. The whole philosophy around that parklet was for it to be open and really kind of a gift to the community. And we know that our applicants for the parklet that you reviewed recently were amenable to allowing their space to be used by the public when their business was not open. Sometimes we may be concerned about how those uses are monitored or managed. None of the parklets that we're looking at are really covered. When they're covered, they can be used for sheltering. And so that can be a challenge. And we're going to have to really spend a lot of time seeing how public use of these kinds of spaces is working. Right now, though, staff is really encouraged because we have the orange K-rail spaces out there now. they're going fine. So we would hope that in their new incarnation with nice planters and all the other features that we would just continue to have that same experience. Regarding noise, music, sound amplification, we'll do a little more study and come back on that. I don't think it has to be that complex. We already have sound amplification permit requirements. We have some sound level limitations. I think we can work through that. We have, let's see here. Of the short-term parking, we definitely, if I didn't already mention that, we definitely want to look into that. That was an issue with that other business, and we could imagine different kinds of parking controls could be helpful. Now, that said, there is so much parking available in the morning on Kelly and other places. I look out my window and I see people with bags of donuts, and they're not having any trouble getting a place to park and get over to the bakery and other businesses that have those busy hours. In addition to looking up those things that you brought up tonight, which we really appreciate your discussion, we will do more outreach. Joe's going to go back to the downtown business folks. We'll make sure that there's a way for people to give input. And we're happy to go and revisit some of the other downtowns, some that are, whether they're more mature or not. There's lots of great examples out there. You saw, we didn't show you pretty pictures today because most of the photos we have are during what we call the Orange K-Rail phase. And now cities are starting to graduate from that. So they're looking better week by week. Something that occurred to me while you were talking, I think we should include as part of the program some terms to monitor what's going on. We already have been monitoring parking occupancy, and it's a good thing to do, and so we can tack that into this program. We can certainly monitor the demand for parklets, hours of operation, things like that. Some simple things. We don't want to overcommit to things that we're going to do around this. But there's a few things that we could monitor and then report back to you a couple of years in and see how things are going. Is there anything else from the commission tonight on this topic?
No, I think you've seen it. I think you've seen a really high level of support and excitement over the idea. I don't think we necessarily answered your big questions, which is parking is going to be the big issue. And I don't know that we came up with any kind of, that we were really helpful. But Vice Chair Hernandez, you have something to add?
No, I just wanted to affirmatively say, when I say support the program, I support the area in question that you've marked out on the map. So I do think that the area makes sense. It's logical, and I think it's a great place to start.
Right, for now. And Commissioner Benjamin.
Right. So thank you for the answers. I want to be clear. I'm not disappointed, and I wasn't asking for a Mountain View plan. I'm happy with where we're going, with what this is. I want to be sure that if we're successful, it's going to draw more people to town. It's going to maybe increase the demand for parking. So there's a dependence, a feedback loop here that hopefully contributes to the growth of town and its increased attractiveness. So there's some relationship that's not, it's not deterministic, but hopefully we get to the point that we're building that kind of demand. And I just want to be sure that the way we're thinking about this doesn't preclude us from growing. So I'm comforted by the answer that you could see one day we get to the point, you or a decade from now, Community Development Director, Butcher, tells us we need to set aside what we've been doing over these last 20 years. Now it's time for the big, bold gesture, and let's have a look at some of those towns that developed 30 years earlier. So I don't have grandiose ideas about how we should be acting to achieve those things. I just want to be sure that we create the space for that to happen organically rather than doing something that prevents it. Thanks.
Yeah. And it looks like Commissioner Reddick, you get last word.
Well, I just want to applaud the articulateness of Commissioner Benjamin and Director Ekus. I think you both hit the nail on the head. I love the phrase of, this program is about what we can do now to benefit the downtown and the businesses there who have been struggling for at least the last 2 years. But let's do it with an eye to not foreclosing good opportunities in the future. So thanks again.
Great. So you have all the information you need, Jill, right? So we can move along?
We do, thank you. I know Joe and Jonathan and Scott have all spent a lot of time, and I appreciate your hosting the study session tonight. And you'll see us come back with a much more buttoned up program, and we appreciate your time.
That seems pretty close right now. So
happy to hear that.
That's great.
Chair Gorn, pardon the interruption. I've got to go find a new charger before I drop out of this meeting. So
okay.
May we take 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We'll take a 5-minute break. We'll be back around 9 o'clock. Thanks. Okay with everybody?
Yeah.
All right.
See you soon.
All right, are we ready to reconvene? Bridget, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, great. Let's reconvene. I officially reconvene.
All commissioners are present.
Yes, we are. So our next step is to look at the 2021 housing element, just the progress report. Jill, is that you? Okay. And are you ready to talk about that?
Sure. So this is something that the Planning Commission gets to take a look at every year, as well as City Council. Currently, the city is in Cycle 5 housing element. It's 2015 to 2023. It's an 8-year housing element, and we're coming to the end of it. The annual progress report is submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development by April 1st. You really don't have any action other than to acknowledge receipt, and we will bring it to City Council at their next meeting as well. It's those are requirements to bring to your planning body and your policy body before submitting it to HCD. I wasn't planning to make a presentation. I'm available to answer questions about it. We try in the staff report to be clear about what's being tracked. The most significant thing about these reports is in the last few years, state housing law has increased the amount of detail that is presented in the report. And so you're really watching the life cycle of project entitlements by parcel. And Scott is here. He really has to just take a lot of detail on tracking every single one of these. Fortunately, we're pretty small. And so we don't have a lot of units compared to other cities, but we don't have a big fancy permit system either. So there's a lot that goes into managing this. What HCD is going to look at is how long does it take for a project to get entitled through the planning process, and then once it's entitled, does it actually move to building permit? And once a building permit is issued, when did the new housing unit get finalized for occupancy? And so those are all milestones that they're looking at throughout the process. They're also, if you noticed in, I think it's table A, they want to know how many units an applicant applied for and how many were approved. So they're looking to see if any jurisdictions have patterns of kind of reducing build out through their permit review process. We really don't have anything like that because our projects tend to be quite small, and all the units that are being proposed are being maintained throughout the project review. They also are going to then compare all of the reporting of these units to the sites that were selected in the Cycle 5 housing element. The housing element includes an estimate of what could be built based on the zoning. It's kind of raw, doesn't take into consideration things like buffers and things that we need to be careful about in the coastal zone. And then it also includes realistic yield. And so they're looking at jurisdictions to see if they're making full use of the sites that were reported as viable housing sites. And if sites are not developed to their potential, there is housing law now that requires the cities to have replacement sites. And so that's something we've been tracking as well, as if a developer comes in, for example, and wants to have a single family home on an R3 lot that could hold 3 units. We need to make up for the 2-unit loss. it's actually a reason why we, in your land use plan, are seeking minimum densities on R3 properties, because we don't want things like that to happen. And it may surprise people that less density might be voluntarily sought by a developer, but the return on investment for a single family home is so extraordinarily high right now that a duplex or a triplex is not going to compete very well with it. So it's real sensitive in that low number of unit range, what can happen, and the city's policies are really important around that. It's table D, all of the policies and programs in the housing element are listed, and we update the progress that we've made in terms of implementing the policy or program. There are those that are require ongoing attention. So it's just about practice. How is the planning practice progressing relative to a particular policy or program? So are we making sure that we're abiding by fair housing laws when we prepare affordable housing agreements? Absolutely, we are. That language is reviewed by our city attorney, and it's included in all those agreements. Other programs are implemented with very specific actions, like a zoning amendment, and so they're done. We can report that it's complete. We will not be complete with all the programs that were put into this general plan element, and that's normal. What we're doing now, we're working on your cycle 6 element, and we'll be bringing you a draft sooner than I can believe at this point. And one of the things we'll do is look at all the programs and policies in cycle 5, thinking through how far did we get with them? Were they effective? Should they be brought forward? Should they be amended? Should they be set aside and replaced with new strategies? And we're doing that thinking now. Fortunately, we have the framework of the land use plan, which is so fresh that it's really instructive for what we're doing there. And then other pieces of this report, you'll see the tally, basically all the years worth of production for the various affordability levels. Right now, we've been reporting out that accessory dwelling units and multifamily units are generally affordable at the moderate income level. Although we know there are some that are affordable at lower income levels than that, but we do not have city-specific rent studies. We do see rent studies more broadly throughout the region, and there's a real range. We also, though, at the same time, have been hearing from our community members who are reporting out extraordinary increases in rents right now. So we just need to be really thoughtful about going forward with our cycle 6 housing element and how to match housing production with the needs of our community. So I haven't received any comments on this report from commissioners or from members of the public. If anything has occurred to you about it, you have any questions, I'm happy to try to field those tonight.
So it looked to me, I mean, it looks like not much has changed for Half Moon Bay anyway. Outside of the level of data reporting has increased significantly, as you say, but I don't see a big shift or a big demand that wasn't there before. Is that right?
Well, what's your this report isn't going to reflect anything other than housing production and the city's ability and accomplishments relative to implementing programs. So it is, there's a stagnant part of it because the base for our report is the current housing element. Those policies and programs that were certified by the Department of Housing and Community Development in 2015 have not been amended. We aren't operating out of a different playbook. So all we're doing is adding year by year how many housing units have been entitled or permitted. And once a building permit is issued, HCD counts that as an accomplished unit, even though it isn't final deed. That's just how they count them. So there are summary pages that show the totals, and I'm going to try to find one of the better.
I get it.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
All right.
Commissioner Benjamin, start us off.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not muted. How about that? The one that jumped out at me when I read it, and I know we've talked about it before, was Table F and all of the hotel rooms that qualify as emergency housing but do not qualify as very low income housing. And at the time that acquisition took place, I think there was at least some dialogue about whether they could ever, get kitchenettes or something could happen that would make them fit into that part of HCD's arena. And I don't know if that's, if I'm just looking towards looking for a patron saint of lost causes here, or whether there is a prospect. And I realize that this isn't something we're going to troubleshoot tonight, but it jumped out at me and it continues to pain me.
I can answer your question broadly if you'd like. So this is still a new purchase, in my opinion. It was, I think the county purchased it within the last 14 months. They have not held it very long. And it's just getting up and running. And this is a 52-room hotel, but the Coastside Inn that's now we're referring to as Coast House. It's being managed and operated by Life Moves. Life Moves is a nonprofit that has many shelters throughout San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. And at this point, they have not proceeded to do any modifications that would add kitchens to these rooms. So Table F is it's a good sheet. No, we're not getting credit on Arena, but the fact that they're even asking the jurisdictions to report out about these types of units, they're considered to be units that are not counting towards Arena, but they are deeply affordable as shelter units. We didn't really know how to characterize them in terms of the income levels of the tenants. So we just did the best we could with that. And I think what you're going to see over time is as San Mateo County has this facility for longer and Life Moves is running it, and they have different funding opportunities, they'll make some choices about improving the facility over time. And any of those units that adds a kitchen can go onto our Arena sheet. And we're absolutely paying attention to that.
I understand. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Commissioner Benjamin, your hand is still up. Are you trying to make a motion?
I don't. If you want a motion to acknowledge, I'm guessing that we've kind of acknowledged. Did you want a motion?
Yes, please.
Move to acknowledge the receipt of the report.
A second.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Bridget.
Commissioner Reddick?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez?
Aye.
And Chair Gorin?
Yes, please.
Motion approved the acknowledgement.
Okay. That brings us to Director's Report. Director.
Yes, it does. All right. Your agenda forecast. We have noticed for your next meeting, Maine and Kelly, and you're going to see story polls go up, I think, at the end of the week. This is the kitty corner from Mac Dutra Plaza. You have had a study session on this project, and the Architectural Advisory Committee has seen it, I think, 3 times. So provided that it is absolutely ready for you, you will see that at your next meeting, and we're delighted to be bringing it forward. On March 22nd, we're planning to bring the 880 Stone Pine Corporation Yard project forward to you. That is, I believe that you already received the initial study negative declaration. Doug Garrison was going to forward that to you for some early reading. If that doesn't look familiar, we can.
I forwarded it to the commission a few weeks ago.
Brilliant. Okay. That always gets the bulk of the reading out of the way. I know it's sometimes a little awkward because you don't have the staff report, but we'll be bringing that for coastal development permit with that environmental review for your second March meeting.
It's also it's also posted on the city's website as well for public. So anyone out there that's listening, it's on the website as well.
Yes, good, thank you. And I know Tara did a big mailed notice for that as well. Somewhere in all of that, we're going to bring you the Measure D confirmation of the ranking. Staff is wrapping that up. It's going to look a little bit like what you saw last year. We thought we had a couple more than we do now. We realized that one of them is downtown, and that was absolutely wonderful. So that simplified things. And another applicant made his application look like it was for 2 allocations, and it's only 1. So everyone matters right now. So we have 41 applications for 23 available allocations outside of downtown. And that's what you're going to be looking at sometime in March or April. And I'm hoping to do it in March. Just as part of the director report and update, I do want to share with you, and I think I mentioned last time that we received an application for 18 downtown allocations. That is for the Creekside subdivision over by Shoreline Station. That particular application includes 4 affordable units at the low and very low income level through an affordable housing agreement. I think it's about 12 single family homes, and they're putting in a few accessory dwelling units into that subdivision. And that's something that can be done with state ADU law. So it's actually, this is a really good example of realistic yield. Our housing element, I think, shows realistic yield on that property of 19 units. And we're getting, I think, 18. In addition to those for downtown, we just received an application today for 10 more mobile homes at the Hilltop Mobile Home Park expansion. This is a site that the land use plan changed the designation from industrial to mobile home park. And in last year's Measure D application, applicants got the remaining 22 that we had at the end of the year. So now they will have 32 allocations. And then we're not going to have very many left because I'm planning to, I'm I'm going to submit an application on behalf of the city tomorrow. I've actually already prepared this for 14 allocations for 555 Kelly. The commission, you were copied on an RFQ that was released last week for development of this city property with affordable housing. And so we need to have allocations available to it. It is in the downtown. And so we'll be very early in the year with probably only about 3 downtown allocations left. It's been busy times. Staff is incredibly focused right now on the housing element and supporting City Council's housing priorities on a number of sites. And we're looking forward to giving the Commission updates on those as they come forward. Let's see, March 2nd, Scott's a project planner on a couple accessory dwelling units that are going to just go for director confirmation. They both conform. One is at 316 Washington and the other is at 409 Ocean Avenue. And we are working on finding a new time for the Architectural Advisory Committee to meet. They are, some of the members are having conflicts and Bridget's working hard with them to find something that works for them and works for the community. They had been meeting the third Thursday at 8:30 in the morning. We may be shifting them to an afternoon meeting and we're trying to avoid all the other meetings that the city has. So that's about it for the director's report. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have commissioner announcements, and we have one from Commissioner Ruddick. Yay.
Just a quick note. I have travel plans on March 22nd that will have me on an airplane during the evening. So unless that changes, I'll be absent from our March 22nd meeting.
I have that noted on the on our notes here, or my notes.
Good deal. Thank you, Bridget.
Mm-hmm. If anyone else has a conflict in the next couple of months, if you can just pop me an email, that would be great because it helps us for some planning stuff.
We really need to know for the night with now that we're down to just 3 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to miss an April meeting.
Yeah, so make sure if anyone thinks they might be missing on March 22nd, please let us know.
Okay. Anyone else? We are done. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Peace to you.
Commissioner Ruddick?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Or Vice Chair Hernandez, apologize. And Chair Gorn?
Yes, please.
Meeting adjourned.
All right, good.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Good
Good night, guys.
Good night.